I felt like I was turning to a corporate gargoyle. I felt that heart of stone developing. And family members who said, Dominic, you come home so cynical, so jaded, so miserable. When I was burning out, it was, why is this happening to me? But now I'm so grateful that happened because it allowed me to be more connected with my passions, be more connected with that higher version of myself. It put me on this journey of self-discovery, this journey of becoming connected with my higher purpose, finding other versions of myself that I didn't even know existed, being able to take that time and recognize that we need to focus on creating things that are real, not just things that we perceive to be real. Show yourself to be someone who is able to transcend being a technologist or security professional, someone who makes this field come alive. Learn how to communicate, learn how to be an empathetic listener, hold an audience that is not a technical audience and make what you're talking about be meaningful to them. You can have a shallow friendship that gives you physical proximity, but you can have extremely deep, meaningful friendships if they give you the emotional proximity, even if they're not physically close to you.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey, if you wish?
I've been in cybersecurity 20 years, and I always tell people that there was a tale of two halves with my career so far. The first 10 years of my career was very corporate driven. I actually was mainly in the financial services industry here in Vancouver, Canada, where I live, and worked my way up the corporate ladder. And I was always just fixed on becoming a chief information security officer. That's what I wanted to do from my university days. And I got to that spot and I actually ended up burning out, because I ended up having to work under an incredibly toxic person. And it led me to falling backwards into becoming an entrepreneur, a word I could not spell at the time. And I can still barely spell at the time, but it put me on this journey of self-discovery, this journey of becoming connected with my higher purpose, finding other versions of myself that I didn't even know existed. The gift of perspective when I was burning out, it was, why is this happening to me? But now I'm so grateful that happened because it allowed me to, like I said, be more connected with my passions, be more connected with that higher version of myself. And over the past 10 years of my entrepreneurial career, again, there have been various iterations and reimaginations. First, I started off just doing freelance work. Then I started to try to build a large consulting company or a larger consulting company, and that ended up feeling like a prison. And the current iteration that I'm in right now is my company, which is Vogel Cyber Leadership and Coaching. It allows me to focus on the two things that I'm most passionate about professionally. And for me, that is cyber leadership. So people call that fractional CISO or VCISO, whatever you want to call it, but really working with immature sectors. And by immature, I mean in terms of how they deal with cyber risk. So I do a lot of work with manufacturing, construction, those types of organizations that have become incredibly digitized over the past few years, but have not had the gift, I'll say, of having to improve their cybersecurity or cyber risk management like other sectors, like financial services or healthcare. So I love doing that type of work and really working with boards, executives, business owners in terms of helping them really just even understand what the heck is cyber risk. And the other side is the coaching. Back to the human-centric approach here, as I always jokingly refer to myself as a security guy with feelings. I'm a big believer in being able to bring some level of humanity to the technology space. I often find that there's no shortage of great technology leaders, CIOs, CTOs, what have you, people who know technology and have visions for that technology, but they struggle with their humanity, right? They struggle to inspire their team. They struggle to connect on a deep, visceral, emotional level, maybe with their fellow peer executives or with the board or with the executives that they report to. So those are the people I love coaching and being brought into those types of organizations and to infuse, like I said, humanity into technology, because I'm a big believer that technology, without that right infusion of humanity, we just end up going in circles, or the technology doesn't truly end up manifesting in the way that it really could have or had the type of impact on society that it could have. So that is me professionally in a nutshell. For those of you who want to follow me on LinkedIn, I actually never talk about cybersecurity on LinkedIn. I'm a big believer in just trying to spread a level of kindness and compassion and humanity into my posts, into my comments. So if you're looking for a daily dose of sunshine or a reason to smile, please follow my content. So that's my answer sort of from where I am in my journey so far.
So many things to bring up, and that content has already put a lot of smiles on a lot of people's faces that I personally know already. You come across as very high energy. Is that how you are now? Have you always been like that?
It's something that I'll go back to that evolution. And one of the things that I'm grateful for from burning out, there was a lot of, I'll say, pieces of this that existed in corporate, But when I burned out in corporate, it challenged me to look at assumptions that I long held about myself, even assumptions that were maybe put onto me by my parents or when I was going to school or what have you. I always thought I was extremely introverted, right? I didn't really focus on relationship building. I liked making people feel good, but I didn't bring that level of high energy. Those are all things that evolved as I became like an entrepreneur. And like I said, as I actively challenged long-held assumptions about myself. So I like to say that it was a hidden dimension in me all along, but entrepreneurialism allowed it to come out.
So I wanted to go a little bit back to a few things you mentioned, specifically the burnout and the moment of clarity. Let's talk about burnout first, because I think for a lot of people, they at the back of their heads, they're wondering, is this burnout that I'm feeling, or is that just I'm tired or I'm having a bad week or month or decade? How do you know what's burnout and was just a bad streak?
Yeah, to me, it was about feeling what I call my inner flame going out. There was a stretch there in my corporate days where I could feel that intrinsic flame, motivation, whatever you want to call it. I felt like I was what I often jokingly refer to as I felt like I was turning to a corporate gargoyle, where I felt that heart of stone developing. And there was observations from my wife and other family members who said, Dom, you come home so cynical, so jaded, so miserable. That's not who you are. And we don't even recognize you some days when you come home. And so that coupled with that, and then I had an aha moment when I was watching one of the Batman movies with Christian Bale, who's the one with Joker and Two-Face, where there was the line towards the end where it was said that you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain. And I felt like I was becoming that type of corporate villain that I never thought I would become. So like I said, for me, the difference between a bad streak and knowing I was burning out was that very flame was burning out. I could feel it disappearing. I credit all of those different situations or those parts there to allow me to realize when I had that moment, and I still remember having that moment while watching that movie. That was the last sort of piece of the puzzle. I handed in my resignation the following day.
Permission to use corporate gargoyle going forward?
Please, yeah.
Thank you.
I saw it somewhere and I don't know who to attribute it to, so let's pass it on.
And the moment of clarity, how do you distinguish a moment of clarity where this is really you discovering what you want to do next with just an idea that sounds good and might not sound so well a week after? Because obviously it's easy to give someone this, follow your passion, sticker bumper advice kind of thing. Yeah. But it doesn't always apply. And the answer is not always, quit what you're doing, go back for 2 years, start farming some llamas and then find yourself. What helped you distinguish that was your moment of clarity?
Yeah, and I'm thinking about that visual about the llama. So for me, when I got to that spot, when I resigned, I recognized that there had been also different supportive voices in my ecosystem that said, you can't just go to another corporate job, right? Because I had been going to different corporate jobs and it was always the same thing, right? It was a nice sort of honeymoon phase and then again, levels of misery set in. My brother in particular, he is an electronic engineer by schooling, but he became an entrepreneur very early on in his life. And he said, you should look at that. You'd be so good at that. And I had another close friend of mine who was a recruiter at the time. He said, Dom, you could make so much more and you could work from home, which wasn't pretty much a thing 10 years ago, he said, by just doing independent security contracts. So when I quit, I called both of them and I said, I need your help to help me understand what would next look like. And my recruiter friend, keeping his word, he said, give me half an hour. And he said, I will find you a great contract. And 28 minutes later, he called me. He said, Dom, I have someone here from a large telecom company here in Canada. He said, they're looking for someone to be part of an extended SOC team, completely remote contract. They need help with a contract of theirs. Would you be interested? And he sent me the details, looked at the pay. I was like, wow, this is more than twice what I was making in corporate. And I get to work from home. This is great. That provided me stability to start working on what I wanted to do as an entrepreneur. Right. So it was that level of clarity when I said, as I started to piece together, sort of, for me, all the lessons learned of what not to do. I'm very grateful again from corporate taught me a lot of what not to do. That started to put wheels in motion for the various, I'll say, foundational bedrock that has become my entrepreneurial spirit and ethos, and is taking a very human-centric and relationship-centric approach to life and to being an entrepreneur. So I had some clarity initially from people who believed in me, and then that clarity, you keep working on it or reimagining that, and as time has gone on.
And seems to be working out perfectly fine for you.
I'm happy. This is my work attire. This is my work beard. I get to bring my kids to school. I get to pick them up. To me, this current iteration I'm in right now has afforded me the lifestyle that I've sought after since I became a parent, was just being able to, if I don't feel like working, I'm going to just have my time with my kids. Like during the summer, I'm able to work less. And my clients, my prospects know that I don't take calls as I'm getting them ready for school. That's time I love spending with them. And I don't take calls after 3 p.m. my time because they're home. And I've made a promise to both of them that when they're home, I focus on them. I don't focus on work. So yes, it's going well, Miko.
That sounds pretty amazing. Is there anything in particular about security people that makes them inherently less human than the others? Or is just that you happen to work in this domain and that's where you started?
I'll abstract that to broader IT and broader technologists as well. Yeah. One of the greatest compliments, or it's a greatest compliment, but it's also, I think, one of the greatest damnations on our industry as well, is when I'm talking to a prospect and they're like, wow, you're nothing like I would have thought a security person would be. You're nothing like any of the security people I've ever met before.
Oh yeah, your beard doesn't match.
No, yeah. Thank you. Those are nice words, but also that's so sad because that's one of the things that's held our industry back. When I'm focusing on thinking about cybersecurity, is that I've been at this 20 years. So many of the same problems that we were talking about 20 years ago, we're still talking about now. And to me, I'm a big believer that if we were more in tune, and by we, I mean security people, in tune with our humanity and how we form deep, visceral, human, emotional connections with people, a lot of these problems, I think we would have been able to solve, right? It's not just about hey, let's come up with a new tool or a new widget. Like the security vendor space is so crowded now compared to when I started. There's so many startups. And again, that's great. There's a lot of great innovation there. But there's all this innovation, but yet where there's still problems from 20 years ago that we have not fixed. So there's a disconnect there, right? A lot of those stereotypes and the disconnect between, I'll say, business and IT or business and security, those gaps still exist. Arguably, they're bigger now than when I started 20 years ago. Why? It's not for the lack of technical innovation. For me, it's the lack of human innovation, right? And the unwillingness to go beyond, I'll say, what many IT and security people have conditioned themselves to think of themselves as, mainly as technologists. And when I go into an organization, and especially from a coaching perspective, I'll ask to see their training plans. I'll say, like, how are you training your IT team? How are you training your security team? And especially with the large organizations, they're like, yeah, well, this is how we're getting them these certs and we have budget for training. I'm like, this is all good, but this is all technical stuff. Where are you helping them to learn how to communicate empathetically? How are you teaching them to be better listeners? How are you teaching them to be better communicators to non-technical people? Where is that stuff? Oh, wow. No one's actually ever asked us that or thought about that before, right? It blows my mind. Even when I talk to students, and I have the opportunity to speak to students at colleges and universities talking about cybersecurity, I always get all these questions. What tech certifications should I get? What security certifications should I get? I always say, you know what? That is the wrong question to ask, right? If you really want to stand out in the field, right? Show yourself to be an amazing communicator. Show yourself to be a human. Show yourself to be someone who is able to transcend being a technologist or security professional, someone who makes this field come alive. One of the things that breaks my heart over the past few years, we've seen so many people laid off in the tech field and security field to a degree as well. And the thing is, they all look the same. They all have the same training. They all have the same certs, right? And people are like, why can't I get hired? What, am I missing a cert? No, like the people who end up being able to not be looking for work for 6-9 months or a year are those that say, how can I be different than my peers? The way you can be different than your peers is, like I said, learn how to communicate, learn how to be an empathetic listener, learn how to, like I said, hold an audience that is not a technical audience and make what you're talking about be meaningful to them. We don't do that enough in our field. To me, injecting a little bit of humanity, your humanness into what you do, that's going to make you stand out. And like I said, the fact that it still blows people's mind blows my mind. We need to do more of that. And I think that's really what's going to truly transcend how technology and how security affects organizations and how it affects society.
And I think part of the problem is also that it's easy to demonstrate technical prowess, right? You mentioned certs. Yes. You've got this cert, that means that you achieved a certain level of expertise that you can demonstrate. They don't give out certificates for being a human. I guess they do at the birth.
You're born, here's your birth certificate.
Yeah, exactly. And that's probably the extent of it. How do you demonstrate that? Even when I'm thinking about the hiring process, you've got such a limited amount of time that you assess the candidates, and you get a certain amount of read of, okay, is this person nice? Are they empathetic? But this is a very small sample, and typically you only learn about what they really like in the context of working with them in a stressful situation like that. Do you have a recipe? What's your advice dealing with that?
That's a really good question. I'm going to give two parts to that. So one is being able to demonstrate it in an organizational setting, right? I had a prospect reach out to me and said, hey, you know what? We have a brand issue here in IT, right? People hate IT, mainly because our help desk, which is often the front-facing brand of IT in many organizations, he said, we're filled with great technologists here, but they don't realize that they're a bunch of arrogant a-holes. His words, not mine. And he said, can you help with that? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So by looking around the metric around branding, what do people perceive the brand of IT to be? So by taking some time and working with the help desk team in terms of, hey, even if you don't realize you're being arrogant, here's how we can tone that down. If someone says this, rather than you saying this, try this, and giving them the tools and scripts and what have you. And over a period of 6 months, and again, by checking with various people in the organization or surveys or what have you, the brand or the perception of the brand of IT went up. So that was a way of quantifying or being able to demonstrate, hey, if you invest in your people, there's power here. Now that IT has a higher brand, the CIO was facing less resistance, right? He was facing less people who were often pissed off with him. And rather than having to talk about with executives about like desktop support, he can now have strategic discussions. They were now coming to him for strategic reasons, which is what he wanted as a CIO. So that's a way to be able to quantify it. But like you mentioned in terms of the hiring process, right? Yeah, that is harder. I'll admit that. But I think being able to understand, like from a hiring perspective, look for people that are what I refer to as cultural enhancers, right? A lot of people use the term cultural fit. I don't like that term. To me, you should be looking for people who are going to enhance your culture. We can always improve. We can always strengthen. We can always take our culture from here to here, right? What are we looking for? And recognizing at the end of the day that we're hiring people, not hiring robots, not hiring IT, we're hiring people. So often what I find in terms of my recipe when I'm helping my clients build out their security team as an example, right? So I've built out many security teams for my clients. And when we're hiring a security analyst, like their first security hire as an example, yes, we're making sure that there's some level of experience or some level of knowledge, but I'm looking to have discussions, right? Having these questions, rather than them being very close-ended, tell me about this, or if this is the problem, how are you going to solve that? I'll ask more, like I say, culturally rooted questions. So as an example, I'll say, you're facing some resistance around this new security initiative in the organization. How would you approach that? Who would you talk to? What would you say? Those are questions that, again, someone who maybe is just so technically inclined would struggle with, or they would say, it's security. We're going to stiff arm our way through, right? It's security or bust or what have you. We're going to steer clear of those people in that type of situation. I'd be able to say, here, there's a level of empathy, or they'd be, saying, hey, I'm going to finding out why they're worried about that, trying to understand their side, their perceptions around it. And here's what I would do to maybe help change those perceptions. Now that's someone who I can tell is rooted in empathy, right? Because they're talking about understanding someone else's viewpoint. So to me, I think it's about adding enough depth from a cultural enhancement perspective, those types of questions that get people to be able to demonstrate that they would be able to talk in a way that is based in empathy and humanity, right? Like I said, rather than just a very tech-centric question. So it's not necessarily a recipe, but like I said, trying to position questions that way.
Have you considered pitching a documentary to Netflix or something?
I haven't, but now that you put that seed in my head.
There you go. Now we're equal for the Gargoyle. I was thinking, as you were describing that scene, it's very cinematic. Someone comes and bring this poster about how to not be an a-hole, and here's 17 bullet points for you. I think it would be a great quasi-documentary, like the Big Short or something. I'm sure Ryan Gosling would jump on this opportunity. What we think, though, humans are so bad at being a human? Because from the first principles approach, you would expect that an average human spends most of their lives being a human. And maybe if we discount the first few years when they're not particularly conscious and they can't distinguish from their reflection in a mirror, you should have a decent amount of experience being a human. What is missing? Why are we like that?
Yeah, boy, that is a very deep question. Before I answer that, if I am successful with Netflix, you're going to hop on as like an executive producer or something. But to answer that question, to me, I think there's a couple layers to it. One is that, and this perspective has come to me as a parent, where so many households are just so busy, they're always just go. We don't have a chance to really connect with each other. And I know, especially when my kids have gotten older, they're in different activities and things. We don't have time to be human with each other, right? Our relationships are more driven around transactions, me driving my kids to their various activities. My wife and I just almost like passing each other during the day and night, right? And only getting to see each other 10 minutes before we're completely exhausted and fall asleep. I think being able to add a level of, I'll say, slowness or positive friction to our days to allow us to have more human-centric relationships. So many of our relationships have drifted from being very human-oriented to almost being transactional, right? And when they become transactional, they become less human. And one of the things with kids growing up with that, they may not understand the whole nature of what a human-centric relationship means. When I see so many people who get into sales, the example, even just starting out, they're very transactional oriented. Yes, that might be part of the space. Yes, that might be part of their metrics and how they're going to get their bonus. But it still, again, I'll use the term again, blows my mind how sales is so oriented around what I believe to be very old school transactional approaches, right? No one takes the time to build a relationship, build a friendship, just offer friendship, right? And again, it goes back to incentivizations, right? We've become a society that is so focused on instant gratification, instant wins, right? No one is willing to put in the work in a meaningful way to do things the way that they should be. We need the quick buck. I need to get that bonus, right? What's the shortest path there? Unfortunately, it's not always the human path, right? There's other paths that cause us to stray away from those paths of humanity. So to me, the things that I always tell people I'm coaching or anyone who's really willing to listen is add a level of, like I said, positive friction to your day. If you're able to slow it down just a little bit so you can get yourself grounded and even the relationship you have with yourself being more human-centric, that will allow for you to have more human-centric relationships as well. So I'm not a philosopher, but that's my view.
And who do we blame or what do we blame for this increased pace? Is that really like a modern phenomenon?
Yes, I would say it's more of a modern phenomenon. And I'll say it's been gradually changing over time. And I look at my parents' generation, right? They have very strong community bonds, right? Not just people they know, but like very deep relationships, right? And I look at my generation and to my kids' generation as they're getting older, there's that level of speed, right? I think about, and I don't want to say, it's social media, but that whole notion of being able to just scroll through things very quickly, that need for instant gratification, right? That quick hit, right? That has become more and more of a common place in a session, right? You don't get a quick hit when you are in the first few days, weeks, months of building a relationship or meaningful friendship, right? That takes time, right? So if someone isn't giving you that straight dopamine hit or feel of instant gratification, you're like, I'll just move on. That person, there's nothing good that can come from that relationship, right? It's that whole notion of just discarding and move on, right? To a degree, as a society, that's true. We've become, I think, incredibly materialistic, not just with our materials, but with our friendships as well. If our friendships aren't insta-worthy, are they really friendships? Being able to, I think I said, take that time and recognize that we need to focus on creating things that are real, not just things that we perceive to be real. And that very much is the focus of friendships and relationships, right? They should be real. They should be meaningful. They shouldn't just be, like I said, superficial.
Yeah, you initially said you didn't want to say social media, then you said social media. I think we both should say
social media without saying it's social media, right?
Yeah, I think it really plays a role, and there's way more to say. Just the aspect of, from like someone in the tech industry, of the amount of talent that is spent on optimizing the number of hours that people spend glued to these things and clicks and ads and all of that, instead of doing maybe potentially more useful things for humanity, is another topic for another day. But Before we go down that rabbit hole and this turns into a massive rant, if we try to start at the beginning, we evolved initially in these tiny groups, I don't know what to call them, clans or whatever, groups of maybe 25, 30 individuals, and you have pretty deep relationships with all of them because literally your survival depended on that. If that person didn't do their job properly, you would probably all die. And then today, you've got like this very shallow access to an enormous amount of people, right? So by definition, and just by the scale of it, it's not physically possible to have a deep and meaningful connection with all of that. And at this stage, I don't see how that would go back, right? This is like a permanent change, unless there's some kind of, I guess, what's the movie term for that? Cybersecurity warfare that somehow takes down all of the social media. It's probably not going back, right?
Right.
Is there a way for us to go back?
I believe there is. I really do. And to me, you mentioned about like physical proximity and going back to origins of our species. Yes, the physical proximity was that as a matter of, survival. And even in the days pre-social media, our friendships were based on physical proximity to one another. Social media did change that. But I think what it did is that it brought it to a spot where it can truly transform if we choose it to, right? And that to me is around emotional proximity, right? Just because someone, you see them all the time, does that really mean that they're a great friend? No, if they're not giving you the emotional proximity, the emotional time, that emotional level of being there, right? That's a shallow friendship. So you can have a shallow friendship that gives you physical proximity, but you can have extremely deep, meaningful friendships if they give you the emotional proximity, even if they're not physically close to you. And like I said, I think about platforms like LinkedIn. And LinkedIn for me has been a transformational platform for me. It's allowed me to form amazing friendships with people all over the world, including you, Miko. And when we're able to keep focusing on allowing for that emotional proximity, right? So for me, I make sure every month people I've made friendships with or started connecting with on LinkedIn, we have offline conversations. And maybe we start operationalizing that, maybe once a quarter, once a month, once every other month, whatever a cadence would be, giving that person the emotional proximity just to have conversations, right? Some of the best friendships I have come through that platform. In fact, one of my closest friends, he lives in Toronto, so it's the other part of the country here, nowhere near Vancouver. Mm-hmm. Former CISO of a very large Canadian company. He and I connected over LinkedIn, and we started having this amazing conversation, and we just started chatting. Every week we would chat. And this was about 5 years ago when we started, to the point now where he and his wife are friends of mine. They're family friends. They talk with my wife. We went to Disneyland together, for God's sake. Right? But we have all these amazing conversations. And that is so cool because, again, we gave ourselves that emotional proximity, and we still do. In all years I've known him, I think I've only seen him 3 times. But like I said, we give each other this emotional proximity, and we have this deep friendship. And like I said, he's one of my closest friends. So to answer your question, yeah, I think it's not just a matter of going back. I think we can propel forward and move beyond physical proximity relationships, which was the norm back in the day. But to give us, like I said, what you can, give that emotional proximity that can really turbocharge friendships and relationships.
I love your test for friendship. You're good friends if you go to Disneyland with your families and the whole day, and you're still considering the other person.
And you can still be friends after. There's the new litmus test.
Yeah, so the social media is everything really, but a double-edged sword, right? It can make things terrible. It can also make things possible that just would never be possible. I was going to ask you about, like, LinkedIn is one example, but I think potentially a bigger influence is like all these dating apps, right? Where people try to form like romantic relationships. And this is also affected by the volume business now, right? You have access to so many people and so little about them. I'm pretty sure that affects how people form these bonds. But again, another day, another topic for another day.
A lot of rabbit holes here.
So I guess for anybody who's listening to this and thinking, okay, this is great, this is amazing, but obviously if I go and talk to my company or wherever, they'll be like, oh yeah, this is a little bit wishy-washy. I don't think that's going to look particularly well on the expenses list. How do you get people to get started on this, like to invest in this?
That's a fabulous question, and one in which I'll say that I'm continually refining and recognizing that there's still I'll say, segment of the population that will just always see it as wishy-washy, right? I've recognized that, and I'll give an example. I was speaking with a CIO the other day, I was introduced to him by a friend of mine and I laid out the value of coaching and that. And he said, nah, this is voodoo. I don't believe in this. I'd rather buy another piece of technology. To which I said, you know what you're saying there is the problem, but I respect what you're saying, but you saying that is why I do coaching. I've come to recognize that not everyone is going to understand that. And to me, it's about really focusing on up and coming leaders, right? Because there's leaders who get that and there's leaders who don't get that. And at least for me, I found that trying to convince those of the value of coaching, unless they get called out on being lack of humanity or being a terrible leader, I tend to not hear from these people, right? The people that I turn from non-believers into believers are those that are on the chopping block. So quick example, CIO reached out to me. He said, my team will not listen to me. My team does not respect me. I'm on the verge of being fired here because they're basically all uprising. They've told my boss that I need to go. I said, okay, can I see you in the wild here? I want to see how you act and everything. And again, as I had the chance to sit on meetings and stuff, and it was very clear again, he is the type of boss that makes people burn out, right? So I had some very real conversations with him. I said, you know what? I'll give you credit. You reached out, but I'm not sure if you reached out of desperation or you reached out because you really want to do the work. But yeah, how you treat your people. I wouldn't even treat my neighbor's dog that way. Right? You need to show some level of humanity, right? You need to inspire your team, right? Your team is falling apart because you are basically acting as a rudderless ship, right? You are the captain and the ship that you are steering right now has no rudder. You're going around like this. And it was eye-opening to him. Give him some tangible things to work on. And yeah, he was able to start changing things. And he brought me in to coach his people who would come to him with problems. And he was not able to give them the emotional time or proximity to help them. But he said, I can't do this, but I want to help you guys because I do care about you guys. And like I said, it took about 6-8 months and we saw a huge transformation there. So yeah, we can transform some of those non-believers into believers, but it goes back to the incentivization. He wasn't incentivized until it was his own head that was on the platter there. But he did come to see the light. But like I said, for me, right now, I'm focusing on those who do believe in the value of leadership. Those who view that if they are a CIO or CTO, it's not because they're the most technical or that they know the most technology. It's because they should be the best damn leader leading that team. So those who know that and want to do the work on that, those are the people. And like I said, I find that tribe on platforms like LinkedIn, and I find those people through my network. For the most part, I'm not going to convince people who don't want to be convinced.
And I think to a certain extent, we have to understand why, because the incentives are never realigned. Like it starts very early. Yes. At school, you don't get good grades for being human to others. You get good grades for passing standardized tests, right? So you optimize for whatever the incentives are. And then at work, it's even worse typically. Yep. And some places they kind of brag about this culture where we squeeze everybody and it's amazing like that. It's very hard to turn around culture, right? This is like this over and encompassing kind of thing that's like a lake, right? It's hard to move it.
Absolutely, Miko. And to me, I often bring it back to one word. It's about rooting it in kindness, right? Be kind to yourself first, right? Show yourself kindness. This story of that CIO, he was incredibly hard on himself, always beating himself up, and he wasn't kind to himself. If you're not kind to yourself, you're often not kind to others, right? So helping him realize that and then being able to then grow that kindness by being kind to his team, kind to his direct reports, kind to his peer executives, right? Kindness to me is a super fuel. And yeah, you're right. From an early age, kindness thing, if it's not rewarded, why do it? And I think there are levels, and at least with my son who's in grade 2 here, he's 6 years old. In school, I see him talking more so about kindness, rewarding kindness in a way that wasn't done when I was in school. And it wasn't even done like with my daughter, who is quite a bit older. She's 14. Even just from that, I didn't talk about that. So I'm seeing that more, right? But I completely agree with you that we need to start doing that early on, right? Incentivize kindness, because we build that into ourselves and more so into our DNA. It won't escape us when we become adults, right? We shouldn't have to learn kindness when we're adults. That should be part of who we are as we get older. A professor in kindness.
Yeah, exactly. Business idea. We'll discuss that in a minute. Yeah. Are you writing a book about this yet?
You know what? I appreciate you asking. I've started with a title, and it's something that I've been inspired to do. So I'm referring to it as the Kindness Project. And what's inspired that book is how I changed my approach to LinkedIn, how I changed my approach to building relationships, how I went from, like I said, my early days as an entrepreneur, just trying to sell and not even having any experience in sales, but recognizing that to truly move forward in anything in life, kindness is that super fuel, right? So like I said, a lot of my comments, my posts in LinkedIn, I've been doing that consistently for 7 years, are rooted around kindness. That to me has been a 7-year-long project, and it's been amazing. Like, it's changed my life in ways that I've just would not be able to imagine 7 years ago. It's brought people into my life I would not have thought possible. It's brought opportunities that ever crossed my mind. And it all started with kindness. To answer your question, yes, that book is in motion. But the Entrepreneurial Dad, TBA on the deadline.
You've got one sign up already. Just let me know where to sign.
Okay. I'll autograph that one for you too, Miko.
Yeah, so kindness is basically a superpower. And I think that is an amazing place to wrap. Thank you so much, Dom. It's awesome to talk to you, and I'm definitely bringing you back again.
Miko, anytime, my friend. Very much appreciated. Thank you so much.